Now we can nest a structure within another structure. Here's an example. Let's imagine that instead of the release year, we want to show the release date of a movie. So one way is to declare two additional members here, like release month and release day. But this is a little bit messy. Wouldn't that be nicer if we combined these three related members inside a separate structure like date? Then we could potentially reuse that structure whenever we need to represent a date. So let's see how we can do this. Before the movie structure, we're going to define a new structure called date with three members. Year. Now we can give this a default value of 1900. That is more meaningful than 0 because it's unlikely that we're going to represent a date prior to this year. Okay, so that is year. Then we can declare month with a default value of 1 and day with a default value of 1 as well. Like here we could also use short because we're not going to represent really large values. So let's change that as well. Good. Now we can nest this structure within the movie structure. So we replace these three members with a date, which we call release date. Now look over here. When initializing this movie object, we have passed only the year. Now in this case, the compiler is smart enough to know that this is going to be the year of a date object. So to verify that, let's print movie.releaseDate.year. So again, using the dot operator, we can access the members of nested structures. Now, if we run the program, we see 1984. But this is not a complete date. So to initialize the date, here we have two options. One option is to create a date object before we create the movie object. So here we pass values for year, month, and day. And then we can pass that date object right here. That's one way. The other way is to pass this initialization list right here. So I'm going to copy this and replace date with the initialization list. Now our code is getting a little bit too long, so I prefer to format it like this. So each member on a new line. Now we don't need the first line. So here's the complete initialization of a movie object. That's much better. Now, as your exercise, I want you to create a new structure for representing an address. Each address should have three members: street, city, and zip code. Once you define the structure, then nest it within the customer structure you defined earlier. Finally, initialize a complete customer object. All right, here's the solution. I'm going to define a new structure called address with three members: street, city, and zip code, which is an integer. Now, in some countries, the zip code can contain alphanumeric numbers. In that case, we would have to use a string. But here in the US, a zip code contains 5 digits that we can represent using an integer. So now that we have an address structure, we can nest it within the customer structure. And finally, let's create a complete customer object. That's super easy. Now I'm going to provide 1 for the customer ID, Mosh for the name, and some email, doesn't matter. And for the address, I'm going to initialize it right here. Again, I'm going to format my code such that each member is on a new line. So the address is going to be, let's say, 24 Santa Monica Boulevard. The city is going to be Los Angeles. And the zip code is 90401. So this is how we can initialize a complete customer object.